If you've ever worked with ServiceNow HR and suddenly couldn't find HR cases, this video might save you hours of frustration. You check the ACLs. Everything looks correct. You check the user roles. Those look correct too. But users still can't see the cases. Or worse, even admins can't find them. The problem might not be ACLs at all. It could be something many developers overlook: COE Security Policies. In this video, I'll show you exactly how COE security policies work, why they cause confusion, and how to troubleshoot them quickly. Before we go any further, there's one thing you have to understand about HRSD security. A lot of developers assume ACLs are the main thing controlling access. But in HR service delivery, this is not the full picture. There are multiple layers involved. You have HR criteria, roles, ACLs, and COE security policies. And this is where things start to break down. Because COE security policies determine access before ACLs are even evaluated, which means the system might be filtering out records before your ACLs ever get a chance to run. And if you don't know that, you can spend hours debugging the wrong thing. So let's make this real. Imagine this. There's a COE security policy controlling access to payroll HR cases. A new payroll case is created for an employee named David. Now, an HR agent named Jenny tries to find that case, but it doesn't appear in her list. Jenny has the HR basic role. She should have read and write access, so why can't she see the case? At this point, most developers assume it's an ACL issue, but that's not what's happening here. The real issue is the read COE security policy. Jenny isn't part of the group defined in that policy, so the case is filtered out immediately before it ever reaches her results. And this is the part that confuses people, because only after that filtering step does the platform evaluate other access controls. Think of it like this: COE read security policies decide what records you can see. They provide a framework to the case security. ACLs decide what you can do with those records, and that's why this issue is so confusing, because from an ACL perspective, everything looks correct. Now here's where things get even more confusing for developers. Some wonder, do HR criteria affect COE security policies? The short answer: no. But let's explain this. HR criteria and COE policies might sound similar, but they solve different problems. HR criteria control who a case can be created for. For example, an HR service might only be available to employees in a specific country, employees in a specific department, or only full-time employees. If someone doesn't meet those criteria, they can't submit the case at all. But once a case exists, HR criteria no longer matter. Visibility is controlled entirely by COE security policies. So even if a case was created correctly and the employee met all HR criteria, an HR agent like Jenny might still not see it. Think of it this way: HR criteria decide who the case is for. COE security policies decide who can see and work on the case. Two different layers, two different purposes. Mixing them up is a common source of confusion when troubleshooting. Understanding that distinction is critical when troubleshooting. But even when you understand that, things can still go wrong. Let's look at another scenario. You create a COE security policy that is supposed to allow only one group to view a specific HR service. You test it by logging in as a user who is not part of that group, and they can still see the case. Now you're thinking, what did I do wrong? At first glance, everything looks correct. The policy is configured properly. The conditions look right. But the issue might not be your policy. The real problem could be that you have another COE security policy in play. If we look at the configuration, we might find a second policy that grants access more broadly. For example, access to all HR cases within that COE. And because COE security policies are evaluated together, that broader policy is effectively overriding your more restrictive one. So even though your policy is correct, it's not the only one being applied, and that's why your restriction appears to fail. Now at this point, we've looked at where developers usually go wrong. But let's shift gears. Let's talk about ways to design COE security policies the right way. Imagine this scenario. You want HR cases to be visible only to the assignment group responsible for that case. Sounds simple, but implementing it correctly requires a structured approach. For example, first, you create a policy that blocks general access to HR cases. This ensures users don't automatically see everything. Then, you create a second policy that allows access only when the user is part of the assignment group on the case. This is what enforces your core visibility rule. And finally, you create a third policy for an administrative group. This group needs broader access to manage cases, especially in situations where a case hasn't been assigned yet. These are often referred to as orphaned cases. Now here's the important part. Once you start layering COE security policies like this, you have to be extremely careful when adding new ones. As we've already seen, policies don't work in isolation. They work together, which means a single overly broad policy can completely override your intended design. And that's how access issues quietly get introduced into your system. Now let's look at a real-world extension of this. Let's say HR managers need read-only access to cases even when those cases aren't assigned to them. In that case, you create a separate read policy. This policy will give managers read access to their group's HR cases. You then define a manager group with the appropriate HR role like the SN_HR_core.basic role, and include that group in the read policy. This allows managers to see cases without giving them full ownership or assignment. Same pattern, different use case. And once you understand this structure, designing COE security policies becomes a lot more predictable. For more ServiceNow expert advice, don't forget to subscribe.